Read the Bible a book at a time. Just sit down and read the whole book through before you study anything in it. Don't just study bits of a book first. Study the book first. And make sure you understand why that book was written and what kind of a book it is. Now, I've written a few books, as you know, and some of them are widely misunderstood. I wrote a book called The Normal Christian Birth, about how to become a Christian. And the British Library, who receives a copy of every book published in Britain and categorizes it or classifies it for the public libraries in Britain, they took my book, The Normal Christian Birth, and they classified under gynecology. And so my book goes into all the public libraries under the medical section. And I've had some very interesting letters from doctors and nurses. But it's nothing to do with gynecology. And then I told you that my book, The Road to Hell, was advertised in a British magazine. Read David Pawson's autobiography, The Road to Hell. And it's nothing of the kind. When you read a book in the Bible, make sure you understand what that book is. Take a silly or a simple example. There's a book in the Bible called the Book of Proverbs. And strangely, it's full of proverbs. It is not a book of promises. It would be called that if it was a book of promises that God made to you, but it isn't. It's a book of proverbs. Now, a proverb is not a promise, but almost every time I've heard a preacher quote the book of Proverbs, he's been quoting it as if it's a promise that you can claim from God. A proverb is nearly always true, but not always. It is an observation of life that is usually true, but not always. And therefore, you can't claim it as a promise that always works. And if you turn the book of Proverbs into a book of promises, you're going to have real problems, big disappointments. Take an example or two. There's one verse in Proverbs that says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and he will not depart therefrom." And parents have claimed that as a promise. And I know many Christian parents who've claimed that as a promise. They've brought up their children in the Christian way, and their children have grown up and rejected that and gone the other way. And the promise didn't come true. Usually it does, often it does, that if you share your gospel with your children, they will stay with it. But not always. It will not always be true, and there will be parents who are hurt and disappointed. It's not a promise. Or the book of Proverbs says, "In all your ways acknowledge the Lord, and he will direct your paths." That is usually true, but not always. It's not a promise that he will give you guidance all the way. If you try and claim that verse as a promise, you must remember it's a proverb. And a proverb is a proverb is a proverb. It's a general observation on how life works. It's to give you wisdom. And proverbs can contradict each other. I can't just put my hand on it now, but there are two verses in the book of Proverbs which directly contradict each other. And wisdom is to know when one proverb applies in a situation or the other. Because proverbs give you wisdom, general wisdom. And if you read and study the book of Proverbs, you'll be a better person. You'll be a wiser person. you'll make better decisions. But don't claim them as always working for you. That would be a mistake. We have two proverbs in English, for example. More haste, less speed. That's one. And the other is, he who hesitates is lost. Now they contradict each other. More haste, less speed means don't hurry. And he who hesitates is lost. Well, we now have a different version of that. He who hesitates is 10 miles from the next exit. And that's a kind of freeway proverb. But those two contradict each other. One is advising you not to hurry, and the other is advising you not to be slow. And wisdom comes in knowing when to hurry and when to be slow. But you mustn't claim either of those proverbs as always the right word for the right situation, because you've turned it into a promise. And it was Solomon who collected the book of Proverbs. And he collected them from outside Israel as well as inside. But wisdom is not confined to the God's people. Ordinary proverbs contain a lot of practical observations on life which are useful even for Christians.